all, I would like to thank you all for being here tonight. It's fantastic to see so many people who are here to participate in this event tonight, listening to the discussion with Mr. Paul Rusesabagina. My name is Caroline Edelstam, and I work with the Edelstam Foundation. I would like to start off with thanking rgfabriken and all those people who actually made this evening possible tonight. I would also like to welcome you, Mr. Paul Rusesabagina, who is here tonight so kindly to share his courageous experiences from the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. I'm also very proud to have the possibility to work together with you, being a board member of the Edelstam Foundation. To me, you represent a symbol of a moral compass, a compass in which human rights should constitute an initial direction of travel. Paul is one of those few persons I know of who really acted in the spirit of my grandfather. He has been creative, persistent, courageous, and contributed to save people's lives, not thanks to his position at work, but despite his position as the director of the Hotel de Milles Collines, where he opened up the doors to give refugee to more than 1,200 Hutus and Tutsis. When many other representatives from other countries, even UN officials, closed their eyes and turned their back, and even left the country when more than 800,000 people were slaughtered to death. The virtue of civic courage includes having the courage to stand up for one's opinion, even when it involves a personal risk. The ability to stand up for one's values, despite the knowledge of open or latent opposition from the environment. It includes the willingness to talk directly to authorities. In some countries, the duty to come to the rescue of a person in peril is enshrined in criminal law. After the genocide in Rwanda, the term responsibility to protect really was fully acknowledged and established as a guideline for the members of the United Nations. It is a political and legal term created at the turn of the century to define the duty of the international community to act in prevention of genocide and other egregious fundamental human rights. The state has the responsibility to protect its own citizens and incorporate the various humanitarian, security, and human rights dimensions. In humanitarian emergencies, passivity is not an option. Action in the field in hostile environments, however, is a privilege of few, because exceptional courage is required. In extreme situations of widespread human suffering and persecution, those who are willing to risk themselves on behalf of others, not only to save lives, but most importantly, to preserve for all of us the essential value of human dignity, indispensable for our lives being worth living. My grandfather was a Swedish diplomat, Edelstam, and he is also one of those few exceptions. In every situation he was confronted, he had the option of using his diplomatic immunity for saving himself, or the choice of acting to protect others in imminent danger. He decided to act, whatever the price. His generosity left us with a legacy of coherence and responsibility, a reference for our collective duty to act in protection of defenseless people who are the victims of serious abuses. My grandfather should have celebrated his 100th birthday this year. He came to Berlin during the Second World War, and he was shocked about the passivity of the Swedish embassy, where he worked as a young diplomat. He himself gave shelter to many Jews during the nights. He heard them screaming on the streets of Berlin when the Gestapo were doing razzias, and he would run out on the street in his bathrobe to bring them in and give them a bed for the night. But he could not help them any further. He had to let them go in the morning, and this made him very frustrated. During his time as a diplomat in Berlin, he got to know high military chiefs, which would help him later in Norway. And he also got to know the Germans who hold very high administrative positions. And they taught my grandfather Harald how one could manipulate in order to set free arrested persons, an art that he would develop to its perfection throughout his life. He had discussions with his supervisor, Minister Richter, who was urging him to open up the doors to the embassy and give protection to the persecuted Jews. But the minister got really angry and white in his face, screaming, "Are you out of your mind? You're gonna put us in war with Germany." And he was sent back to Sweden, as they could not put a risk in getting into further problems. Also, the minister realized that my grandfather had high connections and maybe had better connections than himself that might be a threat to his own position. My grandfather then came back to Sweden, and he was soon sent off to Oslo. As many Swedish people were living in Norway by the time, they had a general consulate open in Oslo, and Sweden was one of two countries, Switzerland as well, who had a consulate, or no embassies were open whatsoever. And the diplomats had no immunity; they had no diplomatic immunity. And he became the vice consul. What he did was that he approached the German security police in order to set free imprisoned persons, which in those situations he claimed them to be Swedish citizens. And this was the very same method that Wallenberg would later use in Prague, and that Harald would later on use to the extreme in Chile in 1973 later on. He functioned as a direct link between the Germans and the Norwegian resistance movement, Hemmefronten, who came to call him the Black Pimpernel. This was because of his black hair and his courageous actions, and by the time the Red Pimpernel was on the cinema screens in Norway. So that's the explanation for this, but that's a name that still goes with him. There is one story when he invited all his highest Gestapo friends for dinner in his dining hall. And at the same time, he used this opportunity to have them all gathered in his dining room to smuggle Jews in and out of the basement. So at this time, he managed to bring in 12 people and bring out 12 other people. But this sort of things he did that was, he took the opportunity in a very creative way. He was also very active in printing the illegal newspaper for the resistance movement, as they had a radio on the embassy, on the consulate. They had ink, they had paper. But finally, the nanny in the family turned him in to the Gestapo, and they tried to kill him twice, and finally he had to flee to Sweden. What happened when he came back to Sweden? Instead of being celebrated as a hero, he was put to the attic at the foreign ministry to administrate the expense sheets of other diplomats. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs was sitting one day in his office, and it came a telegram from Norway where they had awarded the highest order of Norway, the Sankt Olav Orden. And he realized maybe the little mistakes the Swedish government had made. And they called him, get up to the attic and bring Edelstam down. And finally got some sort of celebration in that sense. And after that he became the secretary of the foreign minister, and his career sort of started all over again. He was later, he had a very fine career up to, he came to Santiago, I would say, but he was really saving, he was in Indonesia, he was in Guatemala, and he participated in several courageous different actions where he managed to save people also there. But it was when he came to Santiago de Chile in 1972, when Salvador Allende was the president, and he openly expressed his sympathy for Allende. And Pinochet then took power the 11th of September in 1973. And this put a very difficult situation to the country, that the streets were all of a sudden filled with tanks, and the junta were everywhere, and they were capturing and arresting and torturing and killing people on the streets. And many people were put to concentration camps. And my grandfather managed to save more than 1,500 people during his time in Chile, from September to December. And this he did, he managed to get them out and also to offer them safe conduct and asylum to Sweden. In a letter to his second wife, Natasha, from Chile, he writes, "As you know, my view is that a diplomat does not need to stay in the traditional role of a cool and objective onlooker and an analyst. I am a person who becomes strongly involved, as here in Chile. I think that our activities are part of the task of an embassy. It is absolutely wrong policy to see the work of an ambassador in foreign countries far away as some sort of retirement post. It is especially in these countries where the embassy should represent a modern Sweden." Sorry, I just need some water. There is one story when he was in Santiago, where he got the news when he was at the Swedish embassy that the junta was actually attacking, shooting at the Cuban embassy. So what he did is that he ran out over to the Cuban embassy. He got out in the rain of bullets and was just standing there proclaiming the ground he was standing on to be Swedish. He said, "This is Swedish territory, I'm standing on it. If you continue to shoot at me, you will put yourself in war with Sweden." And those soldiers, they were a bit confused because they wouldn't really know. They just had an order that they had to shoot. And he went into the embassy because they stopped the gun firing. And then he realized, yes, so now it's Swedish. He went back to the Swedish embassy. He took down the Swedish flag from the Swedish embassy and went over to the Cuban embassy and put the Swedish flag on it. Hailed the Swedish flag and said, "Okay, now it's Swedish." And the junta couldn't really do anything, but he actually managed to save all the Cuban staff. And he could use the venue later on, because the Cubans were, of course, thrown out of Chile. So then he had another embassy to fill with a lot of people, which was perfect. And then he called afterwards to Sweden to say, yes, hey, listen, I did something today. And the Prime Minister said, okay, let's go. But this was not very well appreciated by the rest of the foreign ministry because they didn't think he followed the administrative routine, sort of. But this is the sort of things he could do. There was another incident that finally got him thrown out of Chile, and that was, he got a list from someone at the Estadio Nacional, which was a notorious concentration camp, with the name of 58 Tupamaros from Uruguay. And he got into discussions with the junta, with the guy who was working there, who was a soldier and who was in charge of those prisoners. And after really difficult negotiations, he managed to get them all out of there, miraculously. And the soldier afterward, he was shot to death because that he had actually participated in this operation. And one of those persons who were in this group would later on need a surgery. And the junta took the opportunity when she was in the hospital to come and get her. And my grandfather got into a really big fight with the junta, a fist fight. And then finally he was declared persona non grata, was thrown out of the country. But by this time he had saved Brazilians, Argentinians, Colombians, Uruguayos, and more than 1,500 people. And still today I meet many of them. We have one here tonight, Henrik, who is one of the 2 Swedes who were captured at the Estadio Nacional, and who managed to get out with the help of my grandfather. So the theme for tonight is civic courage and consequence. So human rights are the morality's lingua franca, humanity's common language. This means that every person has the right to feel secure and live a dignified life, to be treated with dignity. I will just really briefly tell you a little bit about what the foundation works for, the Edelstam Foundation. And it's about the importance of human rights, the importance of civic courage within the defense of human rights, but also the importance of responsibility to protect. The international commitment for effective human rights protection, peace and civilization, multilateral diplomacy, peaceful settlement of disputes through dialogue and negotiation, institutional strengthening for the rule of law, transparency and accountability. And this is the best tribute we could actually offer to the memory of my grandfather and all those other courageous people. We also award the Edelstam Prize, which is a prize awarded for outstanding contributions and exceptional courage in standing up for one's beliefs in the defense of human rights. The laureate must have shown outstanding capabilities in analyzing and handling complex situations and in finding ways, even unconventional ones and creative ones, to defend human rights. The candidate has presumably in a complex situation been able to take a decisive role in helping threatened people or directly in saving human lives. And civic courage is of course a central parameter in the prize. For the successful candidate. And with this sense of civic courage, I will now give the word to Natalie Rothschild, who is a journalist from the Swedish Broadcast Corporation, who will lead the discussion with Paul, with a real-life hero. Please, welcome.
Okay, now. Right. First of all, thank you so much to Caroline and the Edelstam Foundation for inviting me to be here this evening. I feel it's a great honor to share the floor with you and to lead this conversation with you this evening. And, well, you hardly need further introduction to this audience. I think many of you have probably seen the film Hotel Rwanda, which of course told the story of your courageous actions during the genocide. And it also showed quite clearly, I think, that one person indeed can make a difference, which is of course the theme of this evening. Now, many of us are lucky enough not to have found ourselves in a situation where great crimes against humanity are being committed. And what struck me watching that film, Hotel Rwanda, was that you showed, I think, that it's possible to retain a sense of humanity in a situation of great inhumanity. And in a complex and chaotic situation like that, how do you find the courage, I suppose, to act and not to flee or run away?
In normal circumstances, it is always much easier to care for one's family, which is normally 3, 4, 5 people, even 10. But however, in our nature, we always have influence from the outside world, from neighbors, from family, telling us that you have to do this and that. But I believe that the best way to deal with such situations is always to stand for what you believe in and listen to yourself. I think that the best advisor, as I always say, is our own conscience. Once you listen to your conscience, don't follow necessarily the mob, I mean the majority, then you do what you're supposed to do, what is supposed to be right, because I always trust my conscience. My conscience knows me. It is the only one who knows me, who knows who I am, how far I can go, what I can do, what is right and what is wrong. So following myself, my own conscience, is always, I think, has always been my motto since I was a young man, I think, until today.
And you've been celebrated as a hero because of your actions, but then you've also resisted that label, from what I understand, saying that you were just doing your job as a hotel manager when you sheltered those people. So to you, what is a hero, or is there such a thing as a heroic act?
Well, I think that normally a hero is someone who does something extraordinary. But a hotel manager, in normal circumstances, his or her duty is always to negotiate with people, to do his public relations, to sell his product. He's someone who's supposed to be in a face-to-face with everyone. So, and this is what I kept doing. So, if being a hero is doing what you're supposed to do, then I would agree with you. Otherwise, this is actually the reason why my autobiography is not... I initially wanted to call it an island of peace in a sea of fire. But as people insisted and kept telling me that, listen, Paul, oh, you are a hero, you are a hero, you are a hero. I said, no, I'm not a hero. I'm an ordinary person, an ordinary human being who found himself maybe in extraordinary circumstances and behaved in a way he was supposed to behave. I believe that is the way I was supposed to behave.
But also, as we said, the title of the conversation is Can One Person's Actions Make a Difference? And I think still, even if you don't describe yourself as a hero, I think your actions do show that you can make a difference, and those people who were saved would probably say so as well. But then, of course, it's never enough just for one person or a handful of people to try and resist injustice. So how do you encourage a kind of collective action, or for society as a whole to take responsibility in a situation like that?
I think that this has ever been my mission, to get each and everyone involved in what has been going on. This is why I have been traveling the world, talking to many world leaders. We even came to this country many times, talking to world leaders, to this country's leaders. I remember when we came here for the first time, many people were not even allowed to welcome us into their offices. But what I loved with Sweden, and I promise, if I go, even if I go, I'll always be back. Because you always go deep and know what is going wrong. So when I came here telling people that listen, what is going on in the region, in Rwanda, Burundi, in the Congo, and then Uganda, in the whole Great Lakes region of Africa, people could not believe me. Some of them were telling me that, listen, Paul, let us trust you. You are a good guy. But however, how can people be that bad, raping women, children, recruiting child soldiers, employing what they call sex slaves and things like that? Today, those people were just receiving us in cafes. They are receiving us openly in their offices. And they had gone deeper and even noticed that Rwandan diplomats were spying Rwandan refugees in this country, and even they were spying this country. About a year ago, one of those people, what I was telling them, they noticed that this guy was doing it, who pretended to be a diplomat. Today, he has been kicked out, given 24 hours to leave the country. And about a month ago, another guy who came to this country, calling himself a Burundi's refugee, they happened to notice that this guy was not a Burundi's. He was a Rwandan spy who was working with the Rwandan government. So I think that now everybody is on board. I believe, and this is always my message, I believe that as long as we do not close our eyes, we do not close our ears, we do not turn our backs and run away because we do not want to be involved. As long as we want to be involved, we always can make it.
But I was also wondering, there are obviously many valid or at least understandable reasons for why a person might not act, might not get involved when there's great danger to their lives, for instance, or to the lives of people around them. Are we sometimes, from our sort of comfortable perspective, are we sometimes too quick to judge or too harsh in retrospect on those who don't perhaps display the courage that some do?
That is also a fact. Judgment. You people can always have an idea on others' perception, the way we perceive people, and say, this one cannot do something good. that one cannot do wrong. So I think that sometimes we need to go beyond the way we perceive people, because the people we perceive negatively are not necessarily the way we should perceive them. So I think that many times in our analysis, we have to go beyond ourselves and our human weaknesses.
And then perhaps coming back to the collective action, we heard before that Harald Edelstam was an early proponent and a symbol as well of what's become known as the responsibility to protect. What to you is the responsibility of the international community to act in humanitarian emergencies and crises?
The responsibility of the international community is always to protect the weak ones. That is supposed to be a duty and an obligation. But history has taught me a different lesson. As I was saying, the international community, always the United Nations, always pretend not to see. And they even don't call things by their names. If they would have called what was going on in Rwanda in 1994 a genocide, then they were in an obligation to intervene, to be there and stop that genocide. This is their mission. Once they recognize that it is a genocide, that what is going on is a genocide, but they always delay because they don't want to get involved. They don't want to be members. And also, because of politics, because the United Nations are so politicized, they mean the international community, because the international community meets in New York. So, because of the vetoes and all of those, what are those rules and regulations within the organization, once this country says, we are going to do this, the other one will say no, objection. And the motion is stopped completely, forgotten. This happened when the international community was in Rwanda in 1994. We had 2,700 soldiers who had come to kind of us. We had an idea that they had come to stop the genocide. But this was not their mission. They were not peacemakers. They were not peacekeepers. They were just observers who would come, sit there, stand, watch people butchering each other with machetes, with the guns, with everything, and at the end of the day, just go in the back, just draft a cable, send it to New York, and say, oh, we have seen those guys butchering each other. They were not supposed to protect victims. So the way also then, therefore, the way their mission is conceived, it also limits the powers of the international community. At the beginning, when they meet, for instance, and want to draft a resolution, a country comes with a strong statement against what is going on. But with these politics, in a situation whereby you have about 190 countries which are supposed to be a part of the decision. So everybody, first of all, it is delayed. That decision is always delayed. And also it is always diluted. Because each and every actor has got to see him or herself in that big mirror, which will be a useless resolution. And this is how the international community works. So how to get the international community work better? I think if we remove what they call the veto in the international community, it might work much better. The right of veto has spoiled the international community, and so far, the collective action is always limited, if not stopped.
Do you feel, though, sometimes that international action could exacerbate the conflict or make things worse, because with outside powers come outside interest?
Yeah, in a way or another, yes. But in the opposite also can be done. I said that they can complicate the situation. Before in Rwanda, and I'm still referring to Rwanda in 1994, as I've said previously, we had 2,700 UN soldiers. And on day one of the genocide, this was on April 7th, very early in the morning, the Rwandan army was smart enough to kill 10 of the Belgian soldiers. And after killing them, after the American experience in Somalia, immediately the Belgian government, that very same morning, decided to pull out. And then, backed by the United States, the United Kingdom, the international community pulled out from Rwanda and abandoned. Can you imagine these people? We had trusted them. We actually, before the peace agreement, Rwanda, even immediately after the peace agreement signed between Hutus and Tutsis, the Hutu government and the Tutsi rebels, this was on August 4th, 1993, Rwanda was a country without any sign of security. Militias or Tutsi rebels infiltrated in the country would come in public places like here, throw grenades, kill people, injuring others, and then go to kill someone else. People, they were coming into people's houses, breaking windows, throwing grenades into houses, and people killing everybody in the house. They would stop people trying to get into their compound in the evening, just around 6:37. People just at their gates, we in cars, and kill them. So it was so dangerous. Many Rwandans have decided to leave Kigali and go settle into neighboring towns, neighboring our capital city, because it was not safe at all. So when we saw the international community then, that is how we they showed us that kind of power that cheated us and we trusted. So when we saw them coming in, around November 1993, all of those people who had fled the capital city, who had gone to neighboring cities such as Gitarama, Rwamagana, and many other places around, all of them said, oh, the international community is here. Let us come back. And everybody came back because we trusted the international community. But when these soldiers from Belgium were killed, immediately Belgium decided to pull out and backed up by the United States. We saw the whole of the international community pulling out, leaving the country, going. That was a weakness from the United Nations because we never knew their mission. Their mission was, even if they were 10,000, their mission that day was not to protect, was not to make peace. It was to observe, to stand there. So this being said, on the other hand, as I said, it can also be positive. For instance, in the Congo, we have had the highest number of UN soldiers, I don't know how to call them, but of soldiers, observers, neutral observers, more than 20,000 soldiers for years, for many years. But since last May, when then the United Nations accepted to redefine the mandate, the mission, the peacekeeping mission, and give them a peacekeeping mission in Eastern Congo, in what I especially know, they just sent in 3,000 African Union soldiers, soldiers from Tanzania, from South Africa, Malawi, yeah, I think those 3 countries. And today, one of the strongest militia, which actually is recruiting soldiers in Rwanda, training child soldiers in Rwanda, arming them, giving them uniforms, and under Rwandan officers' supervision, sending them to the Congo in order to loot Congolese minerals. These guys, these Tanzanians, because the whole contingent of 3,000 soldiers is led by a Tanzanian general, they have now kicked them out. They have just recently crossed the border. The political leader of that movement, who is actually, those are Ugandans and Rwandans, is now in Kampala, and the military leader, the General Makenga, is in Kigali. So I think that they can be, if they define very well their mission, they can do an excellent, positive work. But also, if they don't define very well their mission, they will never do a good job. But once again, there is another issue that many people do not see or do not consider as it is. Most of the developed countries are no more involved in keeping peace or observing, or I don't know how we can call it. You will never see Americans, you will never see French, you will never see Germans. Today, going to Africa in such a mission has become a job, so the mission has also lost. The international community's mission to protect has lost its value. It is a new means of improving people's per diem, and sometimes they see people killing each other and they pretend not to see.
And I want to give you a chance as well to ask a few questions. But I just very quickly want to talk about the foundation that you established in 2005, and just to ask you what that foundation does, what is the mission?
Actually, the foundation was not necessarily established in 2005. It started a long time before, but was not called a foundation. It was on July 12th, 1994, when Tatiana, a friend and myself, I think many people did not see Tatiana, they don't know whom I'm talking about. Tatiana is my wife, who is here in the audience. So that day, we had just come out of hidings and everywhere, and the 3 of us, decided to drive south. Driving south, we had an objective. I come from Central South, and she comes from down south, the southern Rwanda. So when we drove south, we wanted to see whether in our families there were some people still alive. What was going on, what had been going on. And that day is a day that I will never forget in my life. That was the longest day of my life. Already on the way outside Kigali, the whole country, you couldn't see any human being alive. There was no animal alive you could see. You could hear dogs barking from the background. You could see a lot of dead bodies, some of them even fresh. We went up to my homeland, and fortunately, my elder brother was there. Because Tatiana's sister, on her way home, she was told that the whole family was killed, and she then turned and went to my home. So my brother could not leave. He was with her and a few others. So when we arrived home, the whole country was empty. We met him. And I started asking him questions. What is so and so? Where are our cousins? Where is my sister? Where is my young brother? They killed. Some of them killed by the rebels, the Tutsi rebels, others killed by the Hutu militias. At a given time, because my questions were disturbing, and the soldiers were moving all over, all around us, the new soldiers, the new army, the rebels who had just won the war, and they were killing each and everyone. Now at a given time, he looked at me and said, listen, oh, do me a favor, leave this place. Because even these walls you can see, they have ears and eyes. They are listening to you. We drove down south. We wanted to see my mother-in-law. She was a wonderful woman who actually would divide, we could take her to a hospital when she was sick and buy medicines for her. And if a neighbor was sick, she would give a part of the prescription of the medicines to our neighbor. So you can imagine how nice she was. Already from far, we noticed that her two houses had been destroyed. Well, that was a very bad sign. And we went up to her. She had been killed with her daughter-in-law, her 6 grandchildren, and all of them thrown in one mass grave. That time, I sat down in the ruins, crying. I said that if I had a gun, for the first time in my life, I would have killed someone. Who was it? Why? I did not know. But this is what I said. Very angry, very bitter. So we drove to see which were her elder sisters. One of her daughters had been killed with my mother-in-law. Her husband had been killed. She was there with 8 kids, 7 daughters and a boy, approximately 5-year-old boy. She was hiding her boy. All the killers, in most cases, hunt for boys. So they wanted to kill her boy. And they were asking themselves, they were asking her, but where is your boy? And she was hiding him. That boy was completely 100% aware of what was going on. She was putting him in a bag, zipping it, pushing it under the bed. So when we saw this, once again, I said to myself that if we leave this woman here, and she's killed with her children, we'll never be free in our lives. Never eat and feel satisfied. Never drink and feel satisfied. Never go to bed and sleep. We then took her to Kigali. That was the beginning. With her 8 children. We moved from our house, gave it to her with her family. And about 2 weeks later, their younger sister came back. She heard she had fled with others into the Congo. She heard that we are and still alive in Kigali. She came all the way with her 3 sons. We sent her once again to that house where we now had 2 widows and 11 orphans. That is, then now, these kids now had a shelter. They had to share with their mothers. But also they needed food. They needed to go to school. Today, most of them have finished their university studies. Then many other kids also came to me. Everybody was almost coming Then we started sending kids to schools from our own pockets, sending those kids, helping them. At a given time, of course, life is not as beautiful as we might think. We had no choice than going to exile. And I was the one to leave. And she took over. She started now doing what I had been doing. And all those kids, we continued helping them. Until then, 2005 February, when Hotel Rwanda came up. Because Hotel Rwanda came up, I have heard that a lot of things happened on September 11th. I heard also that Pinochet came to power on September 11th. I know that the New York shootings in Washington, D.C. were also on 9/11. They always talk about 9/11. So also Hotel Rwanda came out on September 11, 2004. And then a few months later, we took an advantage and called it Hotel Rwanda Rusesabagina Foundation. And then we started helping on a wider range. That time we were helping widows and they orphans, sending children to schools, helping women psychologically. But we noticed that all those children were sent to schools were not really getting education, because the very time that the Rwandan government would notice that they were being helped by my foundation, immediately those kids were kicked out of school. And those ones who were finishing school, not getting jobs. So we said to ourselves that, what are we doing? Where are we aiming to? We're aiming at. We thought that we need now to be, not to help individuals who actually are not really being helped. Let us help a nation. Let us heal a whole nation. Solve a problem on a wider, bigger range. In the foundation initiated with now to the advocacy. Today we are advocating for a truth and reconciliation commission, as maybe, for instance, that has happened in many different countries, including South Africa, where we will have everybody or one who actually never have had so far an opportunity to sit down around the table, to look at each other in a face-to-face and say, what happened, has happened, and why? Who is responsible of what? Bring the whole truth to the table. After bringing the whole truth to the table, we practice equal rights for all, equal justice for all. This is the only way, the only solution to a peace, a lasting and sustainable peace, not only for Rwanda, my country, but also for the whole region. And maybe, why can't we be the lesson, the role model to many other places? So our mission today is to advocate for that Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but also raise awareness of what has been going on in the Congo, where, as I said, many millions of people have been killed since 1996 to date. They are talking about 7 million people and more. Where in the Congo, where they talk about hundreds of thousands of women who have been raped, many kids, young girls who have been raped. We are talking about people who have been committing unpunished. Impunity is the rule of the jungle. For the last 17 years, impunity has been the rule of the jungle, and looting minerals has been a habit. So we are also advocating for that, and we are the voice for the voiceless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So over to you. I can see one hand waving there. In the middle,
Yes, so.
this gentleman.
Yes, my name is this working? My name is Edelstam. It's been a pleasure to shake your hand and to listen to you. You are a hero, whether you believe it or not. And my question has a relationship to Harold Edelstam. We heard from Carolyn how her grandfather returned to Sweden from Berlin and how he was treated. He returned from Oslo, how he was treated. She didn't mention that when he returned from Chile, he also was shunted aside. And he still today has not been recognized for what he did 70 years ago in Germany and in Norway, or 40 years ago in Chile. This is the 100th anniversary of his life. Last year was the 100th anniversary of Raoul Wallenberg. There were big celebrations. It was recognized by the government and so on. It's still not recognized in Sweden. And most people, most younger people, wouldn't even know of him if it weren't for the film that was done about 5 years ago. I think it's a scandal. But my question to you is, and you've partially answered it because you said you went in exile, but how is your relationship today to your country, to the government there? How have they respected what you have done, or have they not at all done that? I'm ignorant on that point, or I would not ask the question.
That is a very exciting question. Thank you for asking.
Ambassador sends her regards.
Thank you. You see, it is not always that brave people and heroes are celebrated, especially not in their own countries. No one can be a prophet in his or her own country, or her own village, for that matter. Let me talk about myself and the Rwandan government. At the beginning, I was more than a hero. Until just early 2000. I remember it was on February 2000, February 3rd, 2000. I was in Washington, D.C. with the audit, who was then the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, who had come to celebrate a special award, the Immortal Chaplains Foundation Prize for Humanity. That is almost 14 years ago. That day I was a hero. All of those people had traveled from Rwanda, and they were in Washington, D.C. with me to celebrate. The Rwandan ambassador in New York, or ambassadors in New York and Washington, D.C., because every country has got two ambassadors in the United States. Both were there, celebrating with us. That time, I had not yet started speaking openly, talking about what has been going on in Rwanda, what they did as rebels between October 1st, 1990, in 1994, what they did during the genocide and the aftermath. The aftermath, which was horrible. And we were there. I saw with my own two small eyes people being tied from the back, beaten, their chests broken, thrown into containers, burned, their ashes spread in the national park and in parks and the national reserves. And I can never silence this, because as I said, if I do, my conscience will never set me free. So the very day I started, first of all, I was almost assassinated before I went to exile, because these guys did not want anyone to be there and celebrated as a hero by anyone else from the international community, to be called intelligent. In Rwanda, you are not allowed to be intelligent. You are not allowed to do business and be prominent, unless the regime gives you that opportunity so that you are working for them. You are not allowed to come, sit, stand, talk, and people say, but this guy has a point. You are not allowed that unless you are talking for them. So I was almost assassinated when a sergeant from the Department of Military Intelligence pulled out, was in my house, pretending that I had stolen computers. I did not have any computer in my house. At least it would have taken place in the office. And then when he pulled up his pistol, going to kill me, my housemate just shouted and said, "He's going to kill you, Papa Fiston, he's going to kill you, Papa Fiston." Fiston is the nickname of our younger son, who is now in Chapman University doing also communications. Very soon you might meet him on your way. So I immediately turned and pushed him. He fell down when he was just struggling, getting up and catching his gun. I was already outside calling for help, and the soldiers came, surrounded my house, got hold of him. And his boss, the following day, came to my office and told me that, Mr. Manager, that boy did not have a gun. It was a toy. I said, okay. In normal circumstances, I have never handled a gun. But at least I know what it is. It was not a gun because it couldn't kill me. But being a gun, yes, it was one. That very evening, I went to exile. So the Rwandan government, when they saw that I was even getting many other bigger, higher awards, including the Medal of Freedom from President Bush, they said that this guy is a threat and he's not willing to work with us. Now, he has to disappear. We want his head. We cannot have his head, his intelligence and everything. We cannot control him, but then since we cannot control him, let us try and kill him. So the relationships between myself and the Rwandan government can never be good as such, because I talk about what they do, and what they do is not always the right thing to be done.
Did we have any other questions? No? Oh, here.
Prata högt.
Okay.
Hello.
Well, when it comes to civic courage, do you ever think it can also entail the use of force? I know that's debated, but I know since Caroline told us that her grandfather was in a fist fight at the hospital, so it's possible in the atmosphere of this foundation, at least. Did you ever have to do some kind of force? You mentioned a gun, but maybe you were in a fist fight or anything. And secondly, speaking about the problem with collective action, collective security system in the UN is not functioning, as you said. So is it time then for countries or organization to step in and take action on the side, perhaps, of the legal aspect, but acting in a moral way, like individuals like yourself? Or is that perhaps open up a Pandora's box too much?
I believe that sometimes the force also can be used just to persuade some people. But the problems are always solved through dialogue. Sometimes, or many times, we have to silence guns and then sit around that table and talk about issues. As I always say, my experiences taught me some lessons. One of those lessons was that the most powerful and actually the best and the worst at the same time weapon is not necessarily a gun, but words. Of course, even when you negotiate, I believe that sometimes you can show that you are angry, you are serious. You are not necessarily supposed to say what the other part wants to hear. You have to stick on your point and strengthen your opinion. I believe in that. I said that the first can persuade opponents because with words, the Rwandan president did not want to hear. Until just recently, this was on May 26th in Addis Ababa, when the Tanzanian president told him that the president of Uganda and the president of Congo, he told them that, listen, we are going to solve this military problem. However, the solution is political. This is why I'm urging you, the three of you, to sit down around that table with your opponents, whoever they are, whether they are some groups of rebels here and there, or proxy militias. You need to sit down with them and find a lasting solution, political solution. That very day, the Ugandan president, first of all, the Congolese president said, yes, we will. The Ugandan president whispered and said, but you negotiate with someone who is willing to. The Rwandan president remained silent. And he waited for the moment. A month later, on June the 30th, he was addressing a group of 1,000 students and young people. And he brought back this issue. He said in his words, I quote, this guy, the Tanzanian president, crossed the line. I'm going to wait for him in the right place at the right time. Will hit him, he will never know what hits him. End of quote. A president telling another president. So I think that sometimes, and then immediately the United Nations, after sending in these 3,000 soldiers with a stronger, a more aggressive mission, they have kicked out the Rwandan-backed militia, which surrendered in Rwanda, in Uganda, and all over. So now, the next step then would be psychologically, and this is what the United States are doing. And we were in Washington, D.C., for your information, about 2 weeks ago. We were in Washington, D.C., meeting with many different people, meeting lawmakers, meeting senators and members of Congress, meeting also with the State Department, those politicians, those players. So I think we believe that as of now the next step, which is the step of words, it is now or never then to solve the conflict.
Right. Thank you so much. Perhaps we could end with a round of applause.
Thank you so much, both of you, and thank you all for being here tonight. I'm really glad that you all could take part of this fantastic story, and I hope we all will find the inspiration to become more courageous and more confident, as you started the interview with. Now we will go downstairs to have a little bit of a mingle with a dinner plate and drinks, and I hope you